The screen goes dark, or the heavy front door clicks shut. You are left sitting alone in a suffocatingly quiet room, staring blankly at the uneven texture of the plaster on the wall. A sickening, dense knot twists right in the center of your solar plexus, physically pulling your shoulders forward. You frantically replay the last 10 minutes of dialogue in your head, scrubbing through the memory like a desperate detective looking for the exact moment you ruined everything. You analyze your tone. You weigh your words. But the math simply does not add up. You did not raise your voice. You did not throw a single insult. You did absolutely nothing wrong. Yet, your thumb hovers over the illuminated glass of your phone, your hand vibrating with an overwhelming, almost chemical urge to type out an apology for a crime you cannot even identify. Welcome to the phenomenon of phantom guilt. The manipulator did not hand you a formal indictment. They did not scream or accuse you of being a terrible person. Instead, they executed a flawless psychological maneuver known as the projection of responsibility. They gathered up their own toxic emotional waste, their insecurity, their unstated demands, and quietly slipped it into your pockets while you were trying to have a rational conversation. They did this through a heavy, lingering sigh as they pushed their chair back, through a specific, agonizing 3-second pause before answering a completely normal question, through a fleeting, disappointed glance cast down at the floor just before they turned their back. It was an invisible package of blame, left silently on your doorstep. This is the exact moment the timeline splits. The weak version of you cannot tolerate the burning discomfort of their silent disapproval. Your chest tightens. You sit there for 40 agonizing minutes drafting a pathetic, over-explained text message. You type out the word sorry, delete it, replace it with a rambling justification, constantly backspacing, desperately trying to smooth over an offense that only exists in their head. You are practically bleeding out your leverage, begging for permission to feel okay again. Now, observe the ruthless version of you. This version recognizes the mechanism. You look down at the invisible package of guilt, see the sender on the label, and simply refuse to sign for the delivery. You set the phone face down on the wooden table. You stand up. You walk into the kitchen, feeling the cold tiles under your feet, and you start brewing a cup of dark coffee. You leave the silence entirely unresolved. You listen to the low hum of the refrigerator. You take a slow breath, and you physically feel their projected guilt hit a psychological brick wall, dissolving into the empty air around you. You think this phantom guilt is a noble trait. You tell yourself it is just a side effect of being a deeply empathetic person who cares about the harmony of the room. It is not. It is a biological tracking device they deliberately planted in your nervous system to ensure you punish yourself without them having to lift a finger. But this is only the first stage of the infection, because the second sign does not even require a sigh, a pause, or a disappointed look. The next mechanism is a trap designed to force you to betray your own reality, actively incriminating yourself before they even speak a single word. You step across the threshold into the kitchen. The rubber sole of your shoe scuffs briefly against the linoleum. The manipulator sits at the island counter, slowly rotating a ceramic mug between their palms. They look up at the glowing green digits on the microwave display. Then, their eyes shift directly to you. Not a single syllable leaves their mouth. Their face remains an unreadable mask of cold observation. Instantly, your jaw unhinges. Words begin pouring out of your throat like water from a cracked pipe. You tell them the interstate traffic crawled at a complete standstill. You explain that your supervisor handed you a massive file right as you were grabbing your coat, or that the checkout line at the pharmacy wrapped endlessly around the aisles. You speak faster, your pitch rising, frantically scrambling to stitch together a flawless alibi. Look at the brutal reality of this interaction. They did not ask where you were. They did not demand an explanation. They did not issue a formal accusation. Yet you voluntarily climbed onto the witness stand, raised your right hand, and began aggressively defending your own innocence. This is the mechanism of implicit blame. They weaponized empty space, manufacturing an atmospheric pressure so thick that you felt biologically compelled to justify your right to exist in that room. The manipulator sits back as the silent judge, while you eagerly cast yourself as the panicked defendant. The weak version of you views silence as a threatening void that must be filled at all costs. Your lungs restrict. You chatter nervously, serving up your personal data, your whereabouts, and your autonomy on a silver platter. Every unprompted explanation you offer is a signed confession of submission. You are proving out loud that their silent judgment holds far more authority than your own reality. Now watch the ruthless version of you enter that exact same room. You step over the threshold. You see them glance at the clock, then at you. You feel that heavy, engineered silence pressing against your collarbones. You drop your keys into the brass bowl on the table. The metal claps sharply against the sides. You hold unbroken eye contact, and you say absolutely nothing. You do not shift your weight from foot to foot. You do not break the gaze to examine the mail scattered on the counter. You let the unbearable awkwardness expand until it coats the walls. You force the dead air back across the room and let it choke them. If they want an itinerary of your afternoon, they are going to have to open their mouth, risk the confrontation, and ask. You simply wait, perfectly comfortable watching them slowly suffocate in the psychological trap they built entirely for you. Now you see exactly how they pull your strings without making a sound. You know how to neutralize the silence. But what happens when you finally decide to draw a line in the sand and establish a strict rule? You might expect a massive argument. You might brace your nervous system for a shouting match. They will not fight you directly. Instead, they will bypass your defenses using a boundary-breaking tactic so quietly devastating you will likely defend their actions to your friends and call it a completely innocent mistake. Your throat still feels raw from the effort of speaking the words. You finally stood your ground, looked them dead in the eye, and established a strict, non-negotiable rule. Do not call me after 8 o'clock in the evening. When those words left your mouth, your pulse drummed against your eardrums. You felt the intoxicating, terrifying rush of claiming your own territory. The line was drawn in the dirt. But now, exactly 15 minutes past your absolute deadline, the glass surface of the coffee table begins to vibrate. The screen flares to life, illuminating a half-empty water glass sitting next to it, and their name flashes across the display in bright white letters. You pick up the device. A tight, familiar knot twists instantly right behind your sternum. You swipe the green icon. Their voice spills through the speaker, coded in a breezy, casual tone. "Oh, I completely forgot you were off the clock. It is just one quick question." The weak version of you exhales a long, heavy sigh. Your shoulders slump forward, the fight draining entirely out of your posture. You rub the bridge of your nose, close your eyes, and say it is fine. Just this once. You answer the question. You stay on the line for 12 agonizing minutes. You end the call feeling a hollow ache in your chest, desperately trying to convince yourself that they just made an innocent mistake. Erase that illusion immediately. This was not a lapse in memory. This is a predatory mechanism known as perimeter testing. The manipulator does not have amnesia. They are executing a highly calculated, deliberate military probe. They are throwing a stone at your newly installed electric fence specifically to find out if the high-voltage current is actually switched on. When you accepted that call and muttered your little exception, you did not demonstrate compassion. You handed over the master code to your defenses. You taught them, through concrete behavioral evidence, that your verbal rules are nothing more than a pathetic bluff. They now know that if they package their intrusion as a harmless oversight, you will eagerly tear down your own walls to accommodate them. Now, rewind the tape. The phone vibrates against the glass. The screen lights up at 15 minutes past 8. The ruthless version of you is sitting on the exact same couch, watching the same name flash across the glass. You do not sigh. You do not debate the morality of ignoring them. You feel the cold, surgical clarity of absolute authority. You reach out, your index finger pressing the red decline button with a quiet, decisive tap. You flip the device face down on the wood. The screen goes black. The room falls entirely silent. You pick up the remote, adjust the volume on the television, and lean back into the cushions. Your heart rate remains perfectly steady. The next morning, when you finally cross paths, you do not mention the rejected call. You offer zero apologies. You provide zero explanations. You let the rejection stand on its own as a brutal, undeniable fact. Operating within the dark reality of human behavior requires understanding a core Machiavellian principle. A boundary without a consequence is not a boundary, it is merely a suggestion. You have learned to identify their covert attacks. You know how to neutralize the heavy silence and how to enforce the perimeter around your time. But the psychological snare they have you caught in is much more complex than simple hostility. The absolute most dangerous weapon in a manipulator's arsenal is never an attack. It is a reward. And the next behavioral trap is the exact reason you are still sitting there, waiting for things to get better. You are staring at a glowing monitor, a half-cold cup of coffee sitting dangerously close to your keyboard, manually untangling a chaotic mess they dumped directly into your lap. You canceled your own plans for this. For 3 solid weeks, you endured their heavy sighs, their clipped one-word responses, and the suffocating frost of their passive aggression. The tension finally broke you. You opened your laptop and did exactly what they wanted you to do. And then, the miraculous transformation happens. They walk into the room, and the ice is completely gone. The rigid posture has vanished. They step up behind your chair, placing a warm, gentle hand right between your shoulder blades. They lean in close, their voice soft, smooth, dripping with sudden intimacy. They look deeply into your eyes and tell you that you are the only person in the entire world who truly understands them. The weak version of you melts instantly into this fake warmth. The chronic tension in your neck releases, your chest expands. You bathe in that sudden, overwhelming rush of dopamine, eagerly swallowing the praise like water in a desert. In a matter of seconds, you completely erase 21 days of blatant, unapologetic disrespect, desperately convincing yourself that this brief, shining moment of affection is who they really are. You are lying to yourself. You are not being loved. You are being trained. This is the psychological mechanism of conditional reinforcement. It is the exact same behavioral protocol used to teach an animal to jump through a hoop. The sudden warmth, the deep eye contact, the flattering words. These are not genuine expressions of gratitude. They are a weaponized treat, a psychological sugar cube. The manipulator starved you of basic human decency for weeks, creating an intense emotional deficit so that the moment you surrendered and sacrificed your boundaries, they could reward your compliance with a massive dose of synthetic affection. You get the bone only when you roll over. Now, run the exact same scenario through a different lens. The ruthless version of you is sitting in that same desk chair, feeling the weight of their hand on your back. You do not melt. You observe this sudden flood of praise with the cold, detached fascination of a scientist watching a laboratory rat press a lever. You recognize the transaction. You look up at their charming smile, and you feel absolutely zero emotional warmth. Your psychological armor remains tightly locked. You realize with chilling clarity that this affection is merely a purchased product, and you just bought it with your own self-respect. You now see the entire board. You understand the manufactured guilt, the perimeter tests, the punishments, and the rewards. You are completely mapped out. Which brings us to the ultimate metric of control. There is one simple, single-syllable word you are physically terrified to say to this specific person. Your throat closes up just thinking about it. And until you understand the deep structural fear preventing you from speaking that word out loud, you will remain their property. They look up from their screen, barely making eye contact, and drop a casual request directly into your lap. It is something wildly inconvenient. A demand that requires you to cancel a long-standing dinner reservation or burn an entire weekend hauling heavy boxes across town. If a coworker or an acquaintance asked you to do this, the refusal would leave your mouth in 2 seconds flat. A simple shake of the head, a casual dismissal. But the moment this specific person asks, your respiratory system freezes. You feel a sudden tight pressure behind your sternum, your throat locks. In a fraction of a second, your brain runs a frantic, high-speed simulation of the fallout if you decline. You picture the sharp, explosive burst of rage. You imagine the heavy, week-long, icy withdrawal where every softly closed door sounds like a gunshot. You anticipate the crushing weight of the inevitable guilt trip, neatly packaged into a single disappointed sigh. This is not a conversation. This is a hostage situation. The psychological mechanism controlling you is selective dependency. Over months of subtle behavioral conditioning, the manipulator has systematically isolated your innate fear of loss and attached it entirely to their fluctuating mood. They have surgically wired your nervous system to believe that their temporary displeasure is a fatal threat. They made their approval your oxygen. The weak version of you cannot hold your breath. You cave. Your facial muscles stretch into a forced, brittle smile. You nod. You force the word yes through clenched teeth, while a hot, acidic knot of resentment burns a hole directly through your stomach lining. You just traded your autonomy for a temporary ceasefire. You avoided the conflict, but you swallowed the poison. Now, freeze the frame. Rewind the tape. The ruthless version of you hears the exact same request. You do not smile. You do not scramble for a polite, socially acceptable excuse. You let a heavy, deeply uncomfortable second of silence hang in the air. You take a slow, deliberate breath, letting your diaphragm expand, anchoring yourself to the solid wood of the chair beneath you. You look them dead in the center of their pupils, and you deliver a flat, unornamented no. You offer absolutely zero apologies. You provide no cushioning. You do not frantically suggest alternative dates or offer to help them find another solution. You simply drop a wall of solid brick between their expectation and your reality. The word hangs in the room, heavy and absolute. But pulling that trigger is only the first half of the equation. Saying no is just the detonator. The real explosion, the true test of your psychological armor, happens in the chaotic aftermath of that single word. They will not take this quietly. If you want to survive the incoming shockwave and permanently flip the power dynamic, you must master the final protocol. The word leaves your mouth and the air leaves the room. You sit there, expecting the familiar crushing spike of cortisol. You wait for the frantic fluttering behind your ribs, the dry mouth, the desperate urge to backtrack and apologize, but your chest remains entirely still. Your pulse is slow, heavy, and even. The manipulator stares at you, their eyes widening in genuine shock. The puppet just cut its own cords, and now you get a front row seat to the extinction burst. This is the psychological term for what happens when a laboratory animal realizes the reward dispenser is broken. They begin to aggressively mash the control panels. They deploy the phantom guilt first. A heavy, theatrical sigh. A subtle slump of the shoulders. They drop their gaze to the floor, waiting for you to pick up the script and comfort them. You do not move. You rest your forearms on the table, feeling the cool, polished wood against your bare skin. Next comes the loaded silence. They stretch the pause, weaponizing the quiet to force your compliance. You let the silence hang. You watch a single bead of condensation slowly roll down the side of your glass. Your mind is completely quiet. It is a razor-sharp, untouchable void. Finally, they pivot to the weaponized treat, a sudden sugary shift in tone, a casual reminder of a favor they did for you 3 months ago, perfectly calculated to trigger your debt reflex. You look directly into their face, and the grand illusion permanently shatters. You do not feel intimidated. You do not feel anxious. You feel absolutely nothing. It just looks like bad, predictable theater. The acting is desperate, the dialogue is entirely transparent, and the stage mechanics are painfully obvious. They are frantically pressing keys on a disconnected keyboard, demanding a machine that no longer exists to execute their commands. The ruthless version of you is fully realized. You are no longer an actor in their tragedy. You are a cold observer sitting quietly in the back row of an empty auditorium, watching a performer forget their lines. You finish your drink. You push your chair back, you stand up, and you walk away. Your psychological extraction is complete. You have reclaimed your sovereign territory. Now, you must permanently seal the border. Look at the screen right now. Say the words out loud. I am no longer a participant in your game. Go to the comments below and type that exact sentence. Write it out letter by letter. Lock in this new identity. Make it a physical, undeniable record of the exact moment you took your power back. Once you have left your mark, click on the video appearing on your screen right now. We are moving directly into the advanced tactics of total psychological detachment. The game is over, but your mastery is just beginning. Step through the door.